Move that van, boy. You're holding up real customers. The shout cracked through the crisp morning air as Daryl James stepped out of the shuttle van. His worn-out work boots landed on the polished marble curb in front of the sprawling tech campus. Around him, men in tailored suits and women in designer heels streamed through the glass doors like they owned the place. Daryl didn't belong. Wearing a plain driver's jacket and clutching an old leather folder, he stood still, out of place and underestimated. That's when Robert Turner, the operations manager, marched over, jaw tight. "Drivers wait at the side lot," Robert snapped. "You don't get to clog the front like you matter." And in that moment, everyone turned to watch, but no one saw what was coming next. Robert didn't slow down. His leather shoes clicked with authority across the stone walkway as he closed the distance, eyes locked on Daryl like he was some kind of stain on the property. "You deaf or just slow?" Robert barked. "This isn't your entrance. You don't belong here." Daryl opened his mouth to speak, but Robert shoved him, flat palm to the chest. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down, but just enough to humiliate. Daryl stumbled backward. His leather folder slipped from his hands and burst open on the ground. Papers scattered across the gleaming pavement. Laughter rippled from a few onlookers. One guy pulled out his phone and started filming. Robert scoffed. "Let me guess, you're applying for the janitor job." Daryl didn't answer. He crouched quietly, picking up the documents. That's when something slid into view, a faded photo of a smiling woman. Angela. His wife. The laughter faded into a distant hum as he stared at the image. Her smile, frozen in time, cut deeper than any insult. His hand trembled, but not from anger, from memory. She had warned him. Told him to never come back to these places. Not after what happened. Not after they let her die waiting for care, thinking she didn't matter. But here he was. For something bigger than revenge. As he stood, a passing employee bumped a water glass at the front desk. The glass tipped. Water arced through the air and splashed across Daryl's left shoulder, soaking through the thick gray fabric. Silence. Then a chuckle. Robert crossed his arms. Clumsy and slow. Perfect hire. Daryl said nothing. But behind the front desk, Emma Clarkson froze. Her eyes were locked on the old leather folder. And the business card now barely peeking from inside. Upstairs, the executive conference room buzzed with quiet chatter, until the glass door slid open. Daryl James walked in. His jacket was still wet from the water spill, a faint damp streak running across his shoulder. He didn't knock. Didn't wait for an introduction. He simply entered, slow, steady, silent. A few heads turned. Then all eyes followed. Robert Turner sprang up from his seat. "Hey, what the hell is this? Drivers don't just walk in here." Daryl didn't even glance at him. Instead, he opened his weathered leather folder, reached inside, and placed a single white business card in the center of the polished table. The bold print read, Daryl James. Founder and majority investor. James Innovations Group. The shift in the room was immediate. Emma gasped from the doorway. Several executives straightened in their seats. One of them adjusted his tie with shaking fingers. Robert's mouth hung open. "You're, what?" he croaked. Daryl finally spoke, his voice calm, low, and firm. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I came to see if this company still knows how to recognize value, beyond the surface." Silence followed, heavy and thick. No one laughed now. The man they had dismissed, insulted, and soaked was the man who signed their paychecks. And he didn't raise his voice once. Daryl's gaze swept the room, then returned to the card still resting on the table like a verdict. He didn't need to say more. The message had already landed. Without a word, he turned around, walked out of the room, and left a boardroom full of power suits stuck in their own shame. The door eased shut behind him, but the silence inside the conference room remained deafening. Executives exchanged glances, faces pale, hands fidgeting with pens and notepads. The man they thought was a shuttle driver had just flipped their entire reality upside down, with one business card and zero theatrics. Robert stood frozen, his face flushed red, then ghost white. I didn't know, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But no one offered him cover. Downstairs, Darryl made his way toward the reception desk. His soaked jacket clung to his back, heavy, but his steps were light, like someone who'd finally laid a burden down after years of carrying it. Emma stood up as he approached, eyes filled with something between awe and remorse. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Darryl reached into his folder one last time and set the same business card gently on her desk. Their eyes met, hers soft with understanding, his steady with resolve. He gave her a small nod. Then turned and walked toward the exit, past the lobby where it all began. No one tried to stop him. And no one would forget what had just happened. Darryl stepped back out into the morning sun, the marble steps behind him now just another stone he had already turned. The van sat parked at the curb, same as before, but everything had changed. He didn't slam doors. Didn't throw punches. He didn't need to. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence wrapped in dignity. Back inside, Robert Turner stood paralyzed, watching from the glass. The same man he shoved, mocked, and dismissed, had walked in and out like he owned the air. Because he did. And Robert? He was left standing in it. Emma slowly sat back down at her desk, still staring at the card. Her hands shook slightly, but there was a fire building behind her eyes. Something had shifted. And it wouldn't shift back. As Darryl pulled away from the building, the corner of the photograph peeked out again from the folder on his passenger seat, Angela's smile catching the sun just right. He reached over and tapped it gently. He hadn't come back for revenge. He came to prove something, quietly, completely. And he did. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it looks like a man walking away, without needing anyone's permission. Darryl's quiet exit wasn't just a departure, it was a statement. Some battles aren't won through shouting or public retaliation, but through the quiet strength of knowing your worth. He never needed to prove himself to people like Robert. Their ignorance spoke for them. What truly matters is how we treat those we underestimate, because sooner or later, they reveal who really holds the power. If Darryl's quiet dignity moved you, subscribe for more true stories of silent strength. Sometimes, the loudest echo comes from walking away.